Hey everyone, welcome back to Williamson Ridge Outdoors. Today we are at our Kubota Z421. We have an issue, and I was out mowing over at my mom's house, and all of a sudden the mower deck started making a whole bunch of racket. What I believe is the problem, I believe one of the spindle bearings actually went out in it, and I'm pretty sure it's actually the middle spindle. And so what I'm going to attempt to do today is actually pull this spindle out of here and see if the bearings are replaceable by themselves or whether you have to replace the entire spindle. I'm hoping that I can just replace the bearings in it, and if so, I need to find out which bearings it takes, what size they are, and then I'm going to actually order enough to do the whole mower, just for the simple fact that if one of them went bad, then some other ones may be about to go bad too. I've only got 145 hours on this mower, and I've heard that, it really doesn't really have that kind of issues until you hit around 300 hours or so, and then you can maybe be looking at having to replace some spindles or something, or some bearings. But I think what has happened, where we mow around our pastures, sometimes there'll be like a hay or baler twine out there. I've hit them numerous times actually, and you just get on it before you know that it's there. It's wrapped up on your mower. It kind of makes some noise for a minute and then slings it out, and you think, oh, okay, well, it's cleared out. But actually it's not. And last time I sharpened the blades, I got under the mower, and whenever I took them loose, you could see that melted plastic baler twine that was wrapped all around in that bearing. And I was told that's the fastest way to kill bearings in something like this, is to get string or that twine or something wrapped around it, because it actually kind of gets pulled in there, and where it's plastic, it gets sucked up into that bearing. Even though it's sealed, it still is small enough to get pulled up in there. And then once you get that piece of plastic in there and it's just kind of going around in that melted plastic, and it turns into a mess in there, then it destroys those bearings. If we can just do the bearings, it's going to be a lot cheaper than having to replace the spindle. I've done a quick search online and found some bearings and stuff for about 15 bucks a piece, whereas the spindle is close to $300. Follow along with us and see how this works out. So as you can see, I've already pulled the cover out of here. This just lifts right out. So I did go ahead and take the belt loose, which is not a big deal. I've got a breaker bar on here, and you just pull this tensioner back, and then that belt will loosen up, and you can take it on, or take it off and put it on, either one. It's not too hard to get this thing to work. It does take quite a bit of pressure, but you can see right there, it's easy to slip on. Take it back off is the same way. Just want to pull the tension back and pull the belt off. Not a big deal at all. That frees up that middle pulley right there, and you hear the play in it, so I'm pretty positive that's what's causing all the racket whenever this thing's running. So from what I'm seeing here, we should just be able to take the nut loose here on the pulley, and then take these 4 nuts loose here on the top, and that spindle actually should come out of there. And then we'll take some measurements and try to figure out what those bearings and stuff are in there, and what size they are. Actually, I think it's only the lower bearing right down there where the blade's at. But since we're going to have this thing out, we'll probably go ahead and end up replacing both sides of it. I'm going to go ahead and take the pulley loose from the top side, and I'm going to be using our Dewalt. Actually, this is actually an old Dewalt impact. This is one of the old XRP 18 volt series that had that big nickel metal hydride batteries, whatever they're called, but the old style. And I've actually got an adapter on here so it will accept my 20 volt max batteries. This is actually a really good way at being able to utilize your old tools. If I'll leave a link in the description below for this adapter, it really brings your 18 volt tools back to life, because it's really your 20 volt batteries, tends to give them a little more kick, plus the lithium ion lasts longer, and it makes these old brushless tools actually pretty efficient. Anyways, I just thought I'd share that with you, because whenever it come time where my batteries were going bad for this old 18 volt, the tool is great, it's just the batteries were going bad, and I was like, I don't want to replace it with those old batteries and stuff, that same type, and they're really expensive still, and they're not nearly as efficient as what these lithium ions are. So this adapter is a lifesaver. I used it on all my old tools that were 18 volt, and I just adapt them over, and they work great like this. So there is the blade shaft. That just dropped right out of there. I didn't know if you have to press it or what, but it did. Yep, it slid right out of there. So I'm a little surprised, but this bearing is not completely blown out. There's actually quite a bit of movement in this inner part of the bearing. So I'm sure that's really what's making all the noise. Plus it's really grindy. You can probably hear that grit. I'm gonna get some tools and see how that comes out of there. But again too, from the bottom side, you can probably hear that movement in there. There's not a ton of movement in it, but there's enough. So this is not as bad as I thought it was gonna be. The inner bearing, or the top bearing, the one that mounts up to the top of the, up against the deck, I actually came in from the top side with a screwdriver, and the sleeve that's in there actually would push over far enough in order to let me get the screwdriver on that bearing on the other side. So I just tapped that with a hammer, and that popped the bearing right out of there. So that worked out pretty good. So now for the other side, the side with the blade on it, I want to go from the inside and get me a metal bar, like either my breaker bar or something like that, and just kind of do the same thing. I'm going to go around the outside edge of that and just kind of tap on it and see if I can just push that out of there. I believe that's moving. If not, we may need to heat it up or something. But we'll keep trying it a little bit. And as I'm doing this, I'm going all around the edges of it to try to keep the pressure as even as possible. And that way it kind of keeps straightening up, and you're not trying to just beat it out. Because if you try to beat it on one side, it'll never come out that way. You have to go all the way around it and just keep working your way around. It's definitely going. It don't have much farther to go. I can see it's actually kind of at a little bit of an angle right there, so I'm going to go to the other side. As you can see, that's actually out flush right now. So as far as I can go without putting it on something, so I'm going to get me a wood block. So I'm going to try to hold it like this, and maybe where it's out close to the edge, it'll come out the rest of the way. Yep. So there is the bearing on the blade side. And you can see that the bearing, once you get it out of there, there's actually quite a bit of movement in this. Plus, when you turn it, it is super gritty and all that stuff, so you know that that thing is just wore out. So we were able to get the bearings out, and I'm sure there's better ways to do this than pounding on that with a hammer, but you know, I kind of wanted to show it this way, one, because that's the tools I have to work with right now, and two, just to kind of show you, you don't really need a bunch of specialty tools in order to do something like this. You know, you can just take regular tools and just kind of work with it and make do with what you've got. So now the trick is, I'm going to have to find these bearings. So I'm going to see if I can find an exact replacement, maybe through Kubota or local if I could get it. I'd rather get it local so I could just get it in and stop by somewhere and pick it up. We're going to do some research. We're going to find out. I'll let you know what I find out. So stay tuned on this. It'll be on this same video. It'll be a different day, I'm sure, because I'll have to find these and be able to get them matched up and everything and find out what the replacements are. So if I would have had the parts here, I could have actually done this in less than 30 minutes. It took me all of 5 minutes to pull the spindle assembly and stuff loose. The longest part was just kind of knocking these out, and that didn't take very much time at all. So I'm not sure exactly what happened here, but I lost a whole bunch of video clips that I had on these steps. And I actually, at this point, have already put in the top bearing, and I pulled the sleeve off the shaft that goes to the blade, and you have to put it in between the two spindle bearings. So I'd already put in the top one, and I flipped it over and was going to put in the bottom one. And you got to make sure you put this collar in between the two bearings. So we're just going to drop that down in there. We're going to open up our new bearing. I'm going to run a little bit of grease around on the inside of that hole. So I've referred to just do it the same way as the other one, but where we'd already put the other one in there, for some reason that video got damaged or something and has disappeared. So we're actually going to do it the same way. Just put our other bearing in. Set it on a solid surface. Take our socket and just work our way around the outside edges of it. And you can actually feel it bottom out whenever it gets seated good. And you can probably even hear the tone difference in the sound of it whenever it got all the way down there. As you put that in, make sure that your sleeve that you put in there in between the two bearings is lined up with the opening, because if you push that down in there and it's not lined up, you can't move that around to be able to get it lined up. The bearings actually hold that sleeve in place. So now while we're at it, I'm going to go ahead and take some of that grease and I'm going to put down in there, because that collar that's in there, the shaft for the blade does spin inside that collar. So it'd be good to have a little bit of grease in there. Always make sure too to kind of clean the debris off of the shaft. And then you can put you some grease on there too. So now we're going to put the spindle back on, and you're just going to do it in the reverse order of what you did whenever you took it off. This is also the time to go ahead and take the blade and the shaft and go ahead and stick it up through the spindle and put the nut back on the top of it. Now I'm going to reach underneath here and actually hold the blade still while I tighten it up from the top. Now, you can see we got good movement. It's tight. There's no play in it whatsoever. Just like new. So our next thing is actually just to put the belt back on. I left the belt on everything else, and all I've got to do is just stretch the belt now over this pulley. So it's got a pretty good ways of getting around the pulley. But as we pull that tensioner back, it's going to loosen it up. I'm going to have to get a different angle on it here. So I'm going to push that back, and then you can just slip the belt right over the pulley. Takes a little bit of elbow grease, but that's got it right there. So that's going to wrap it up for changing out the spindle bearings in our Kubota Z421. This actually is not a hard job at all. You've only got 5 nuts to take loose, and then you've got to just kind of get those bearings out of their housings and stuff, which really wasn't a big deal. It took just a little bit of finesse to get them out. It was actually a lot easier to get them in than it was to get them out. There's probably other ways. Some people may take the deck out from under the mower and maybe even prop it up against something, or hold it up somehow or whatever to be able to get to both sides and all that without having to crawl around in the floor. I chose not to take the deck off, mainly because I don't have a lot of area around here on my concrete floor, and what you're not seeing here, behind the camera, there's not a lot of room to be able to slide the deck out and have plenty of room to move it around. So I figured with the mower sitting here and the deck raised all the way up, that actually gave me enough room to bring everything out the bottom and get all the parts and pieces and stuff out. It made it a little bit tough, putting it back together, because of having to kind of lay in the floor and then reach under there and push that up there and then try to get stuff in on the top. This worked out good for me. Maybe it'll help somebody out in the future, maybe having this same issue. I've only got 145 hours on this mower, and I was kind of surprised that the spindle bearings went out, but I know that I have run over some baler twine and got that stuff tangled up in there, and I've been told that that is detrimental to your bearings. I'd say that's pretty accurate because the top bearings actually were still good, but I did go ahead and change top and bottom since I was already in there, and I just didn't want to take a chance on, you know, having to do it again. So I figured, why not go ahead and do both? But if you found this video helpful, I'd appreciate you hit that thumbs up button. While you're at it, subscribe to the channel and follow along with all the projects we have going on around the property. And thanks for watching.